Hey, this is Marcus Stewart, and welcome to Marcus Talks About Games, fresh off of PAX East 2019 in Boston, Massachusetts. I just got back, still haven't unpacked, got luggage laying around here, all two pieces of which. My legs feel like lead from having walked around the city for the better part of 3 days. And my head is filled with stories about my time at the convention, as well as just going around Boston and just seeing stuff. It was my first time ever visiting the city, so I took it upon myself to sightsee, take in the local vibe, see what kind of stuff I could get into. And that's primarily what this episode will be focusing on today, is just my time at PAX East. This is actually the second time I've recorded anything about PAX East because there was an earlier version of the show that I recorded Saturday, I think it was, or Friday. No, it was Friday night during the show with my two roommates, Odell Harmon, who's been on the show before back in episode 8 for the Who's That Pokemon Challenge. I think that was episode 8 or episode 9, 1 to 2. As well as Julian Harris of the Game Fanatics. Roomed with them, two great guys, a lot of fun. And the original idea behind episode 12 was going to be the three of us sitting around this very microphone and just kind of having a nice little round table about the things that we saw at PAX. And that, we did that, but we also did it very late at night. And by late, I mean after 2 a.m., I think, because we were planning to record it, and then we were out late, and we had dinner, and then we came back, and I was like, we can still record because we were going to be busy Saturday night. So I was like, okay, this might be the only time we could do this. So I personally was mostly mentally up to it. I kind of overestimated Odell and Julian's stamina. And so we did sit around the microphone in our hotel room and talked for about an hour about things. But it was, for lack of a better word, it wasn't the greatest talk because, one, we were all just completely tired and just out of our minds after a whole day of Paxing, using Pax as a verb there. We were Paxing. Bill Paxton? There's one. So we were just drowsy and just worn out. At one point, Julian straight up fell asleep as we were talking, which was hysterical. And on recording, it looked super.
Someone was researching in their
lazy dozed off. You're like, here, you just sleep.
It's a long day.
It has been a long day. We have it on tape. I could always cut it, maybe. And we just the conversations just went all kinds of crazy directions. I think at one point we got into a weird Kingdom Hearts 3 debate discussion thing about just that game's general quality.
Kingdom Hearts 3 was just okay, and I was pissed because I waited 13 years.
Wait, don't spoil it because I'm still playing it.
I just waited 13 years for the game not to be good, and that makes me upset.
I'm still in Frozen.
Oh god, I hate that world the most. It's just
I got to let it go.
They made you watch the entirety of that scene, so I'm like, Sora, Donald, and Goofy could have just really been there in the movie, in the background.
That is an award win. First of all, that was hysterical to me because I watched Frozen for the first time. I watched it just for Kingdom Hearts 3 because I was like, that's the only movie I haven't seen, Disney, and I was like, I don't want Kingdom Hearts to be my first exposure to this movie, so I should watch the movie. So I finally watched it and I loved it. And then, so I, seeing it again, it was super fresh. I just saw this. But it was hysterical because, since the movie's so fresh, I was like, this is just that scene again.
It's literally just that
But
scene.
They're just there.
In as the castles form, they're just y'all jackassing me. You could have just been there. Honestly, just been there.
We took the scene and we kind of pasted the three of them back there just to remind you that this is still Kingdom Hearts. I also like the part, this is getting off topic, but when the organization, whoever one is there, and she's like, Elsa is a bad person, and Sora's like, Elsa would never do that. It's like, you literally just met her. You've had like maybe one conversation. You don't know anything.
You met her running away.
You don't know anything about this chick. And I know that, I mean, Kingdom Hearts does a lot of like stupid dialogue stuff like that forever, but I just like literally laughed out loud, like, you just met her. Which I still have not finished, but I did make progress. I finished Frozen, so I'm not in Frozen anymore, guys. But yeah, like after I finished recording it, I was like, it wasn't the greatest thing. And I after finishing it, I was like, okay, maybe this is still like salvageable. This might still be good. And I went to bed, and then I woke up the next morning and thought about it. And I hadn't even listened back to it. I was like, no, I don't think I can air this. It's not very good. So plan B is just me back home in Florida, kind of, I guess, by myself, just talking about PAX. So, I mean, will I ever upload this lost episode of the kind of failed PAX discussion with the three of us basically tired out of our minds, rambling about video games incoherently for the most part? I don't know. Maybe one day, but I still have it completely unedited, just sitting there looking at me. But yeah, let's just jump right into this. So PAX East. This is my first ever PAX East. It's my second PAX ever. My first PAX was South in 2017 down in San Antonio, Texas. So first time, like I mentioned before, in Boston. And my first impression of Boston is that it's a beautiful city. And as I walked around for a bit, I was like, man, I could live here probably. Like, I think I wouldn't mind living in Boston. First of all, the weather was kind of chilly, but it wasn't awful, like, at all. Like, it didn't snow or anything. Didn't really have to wear more than just like one jacket. It was more windy than anything, which always makes it worse. But when it wasn't windy, it was just kind of mild. It was nice. It was perfect walking weather, especially on Saturday. And I flew in, because, this year's PAX, I believe they added an extra day from what I heard, where it was Thursday through Sunday. I flew in Thursday afternoon around like 3 p.m. and then flew out Sunday morning. It is now, of the time of this recording, Sunday night, so I've only been back a few hours. And so I'm just going to kind of go into sequence of events. So the first big thing that happened at PAX was the Borderlands 3 reveal. I did not watch that live stream because I was on an airplane as it was airing. And as I was getting off, I was kind of keeping track of it on social media, kind of catching a few live reactions to it. So I still have not watched the panel. I from what I understood, I don't know if I got the impression that the panel was long. I don't know if it's true or not or accurate, but and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way people were reacting to it, it sounded like that thing went on for a while. And they announced quite a bit of Borderlands stuff. I mean, they showed that Borderlands 3 trailer, of course, so Borderlands 3 is coming. And they also talked about bringing remasters of Borderlands 1 to current generation consoles, and then also releasing a free texture update for the Handsome Collection, which is the bundle of Borderlands 2 and Borderlands the pre-sequel that released a few years ago. Like, if you own that, you'll get a free texture upgrade. I don't know if I'm assuming it'll make the game on par with what Borderlands 3, like what that game's visual fidelity will be. I can only assume. But yeah, let's talk about the big one, Borderlands 3. So I watched the trailer. I've seen it twice. The first time I watched it was in a restaurant, so I had to watch it with the sound off because it was just too noisy. And then I rewatched it later. And yeah, it was a 4-minute trailer, and all I have to kind of say about it, even after the second time watching it, was just kind of, it looks like Borderlands. Like, I was actually kind of underwhelmed by it. I like Borderlands. I loved Borderlands 1 and 2, especially 2, at the time, because they were so different. Like, this is way before loot in first-person shooters was a standard thing, so it was unique in that sense. And then, having the multiplayer aspect of it, like, it was so unique because it was just this hybrid of ideas of like, hey, Diablo-style loot, but it's a first-person shooter, but it's an open world, and it's also a co-op game where you can have 4 other people going around doing all this stuff. Like, that was neat at the time, back in, what was Borderlands 1, 2009? And then Borderlands 2 was 2012. I'm pretty sure those dates are both correct. probably. And yeah, I love those two games, but oh man, that trailer kind of reminded me that a lot has changed in the time between Borderlands 2 and 3. And I know the pre-sequel came in between that, but the pre-sequel, I didn't finish the pre-sequel. I only played a few hours of it and just bounced off because I kind of felt fatigued with the series even then, because the pre-sequel wasn't really any real leap. It was pretty much the same game, just on the moon, and now you had to worry about oxygen, which wasn't super fun to me. So yeah, like I was saying, like, looter shooters, whatever you want to call them, have become more prevalent in the years since Borderlands 2. So it's that hook isn't there anymore. Like, we've got Destiny, we've got Apex Legends, we've got Rage 2 even, which it hasn't even come out yet, but Rage 2, which is kind of going for a similar kind of Borderlands-y vibe in terms of this open world post-apocalyptic shooter that's got a lot of like humor, kind of like just irreverent humor and personality. So, I could go on and on. Anthem is another one. It just isn't new anymore. So Borderlands 3, at least in that trailer, like, it didn't show enough. Like, it was just more, it wasn't really story trailer because we don't know what the game is about. It just kind of was a music video basically of like things you can do in Borderlands 2, but without actually saying what you could do. Like, it's showing scenes of like combat, and you're getting glimpses of characters. Like, it's got a lot of the returning characters, and I think they showed some of the new Vault Hunters, but they didn't really put much focus on them. So I was trying to figure out if the characters that were new were the new Vault Hunters, or if they were just new, just NPCs or just other characters. So like I'm assuming the two villains, like some short girl who I heard someone on Twitter compare her to Frieza, which I could see that vibe. Of course, Dragon Ball Z Frieza. And yeah, like, but other than that, you saw like the original Vault Hunters from Borderlands 1. I don't think they showed many from 2. They were probably in there, but I didn't notice them. Like, they kind of put the original cast front and center, and then you saw a lot of like the old NPCs, like, I don't remember any of their names, but there was Hunter Man, the mustache guy with the monocle. Remember him? The hat? He's in there. The really big, fat lady that was like a mechanic or whatever she was in Borderlands 2. She was there too. I don't know if Tiny Tina was there. I didn't see her unless she grew up. I don't know how much like further this takes place after 2, so who can say? But, you saw like characters, you saw glimpses of combat, and then the big hook was over 1 billion guns, which does nothing for me, honestly. It really didn't. And, it just looked like more Borderlands. The graphics look the same in a disappointing way. Like, I'm not in the sense that they should change the style. I think that game's style is cool. It just didn't look noticeably better than the old Borderlands games, which is disappointing given how long ago Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel were. I was like, just looking at it, and I was like, I don't know if it's just this video, but it doesn't, like, even the fidelity doesn't look that much sharper than what I remember of Borderlands 2. It's been a while since I fired up Borderlands 2, so I'm probably wrong, but it just didn't look, it just looked like a remaster of 2 rather than just like a jump for Borderlands 3. So that was disappointing. And yeah, like, they didn't talk about like gameplay or anything like anything new, like, hey, maybe now you can play up to 8 players, or I don't know, like, let's run down the Vault Hunters and what they can each do, and maybe new mechanics, just new anything. Like, what can you do in this game that's different than OG Borderlands? I guess we'll get that later. I would, obviously, I would imagine, but it seems like that this would be the spot to do that, because then the fact that they didn't do it here kind of makes me afraid that this isn't going to have much new stuff, and it's just going to be like, hey, you remember those old games? We just kind of did that again, so you know what you're getting here, so we don't really have to explain it, because there isn't really that much different. You're still going to choose from 4 characters. You can team up with up to 4 friends, and you're going to go explore this planet and shoot things and get guns. Some of those guns have legs now. Sure. I mean, a gun with legs too. Also, I was like, isn't that technically just a mech? Like, aren't mechs just really guns with legs? So it's like a tiny mech. I mean, I appreciate them doing something more wacky and stuff like that, but I was just like, oh, okay, sure, that gun's running, right? Um, the billion guns thing. To go back to that, that's a lot of guns. I don't know how you make that many guns. That also makes me worry that some of those guns, like, there's no way you can do a billion totally unique guns. I mean, even the guns in the OG games weren't all that like unique from each other, and not all of them. Some of them are just like, you have multiple revolvers, but this revolver shoots acid, and then this revolver shoots fire. Like, that was the only difference between a lot of the guns. Again, a lot has changed since then. Whereas, like, you look at something like Destiny, which does a similar thing, but Destiny's guns can get really wacky sometimes in a cool way. Like, and they all have multiple effects and they can stack. And so did Borderlands too, to a degree. But it's been expanded upon by like games like Destiny since then. So it makes me worry that because you have so many guns, like, are all of them going to be like this really kind of like multi-tiered weapon of like, oh, it shoots the ice, but it can also pierce armor and do this, and this? Is it going to be like I would imagine it would have to be like randomly generated, right? Like, maybe it's just making up guns on the fly. Maybe it's like No Man's Sky, like how No Man's Sky just generates an entire planet on the fly with an algorithm. Maybe that's what powers Borderlands gun generation, right? Unless they just spent the last few years with the team literally modeling a billion guns. Who can say? But I the first thought I had in my head was like, okay, that's got to be like a randomly generated thing, right? Like, okay, like assign random stats in a random order, and then you would eventually get like maybe a billion combinations if you have enough variables to work with. But yeah, it didn't really make me go like, oh my god. It was just like, oh yeah, just whatever. That's a lot of guns, I guess. The worlds looked like, I mean, they had some varied locations. They just didn't. It kind of goes back to the graphical thing of like, oh, this doesn't look all that much impressive. So it was hard for me to be like, oh my god, look at that new area. I was like, man, this just looks like Borderlands 2. And yeah, I couldn't get into the trailer. It's cool that it's happening. I want to learn more about it so I can be proven wrong, hopefully. And I probably play it, but in a world where like a lot of looter shooters now are kind of online experiences, where like having just 4 players in this world doesn't feel like enough anymore. Like, like when you can play a game that's basically the same, but you can have a ton of players in there, again, like a Destiny or an Anthem. So like, why would I want to play something that's I can only play with up to 3 people when there's games I can play with multiple people at any time if I wanted to? So yeah, that's just, I just need to know more. I need to know more Borderlands 3, but I don't think personally that first trailer really did the game any favors, especially because at least I feel like a lot of the concerns going into it were like, is this going to be like a real substantial leap forward in what Borderlands as a concept can be, or are they just going to do more Borderlands because they think that it's been long enough and fans will be nostalgic for it? Which I know some people are, like, some people have reacted positively to it because they're like, hey, this looks just like the thing that I wanted, because I love those old games. I just wanted more of that, which, if you do, that's, cool. More power to you. Me personally, that isn't enough anymore. It just isn't. So yeah, kind of let down overall by the Borderlands 3 announcement. So anyways, moving on to PAX. So I went to PAX, the show floor Friday. That was my pass. I went as not media, but as just a civilian, I guess. I did this intentionally because I realized I've never been to a game convention that wasn't for work reasons. I've always gone just on an assignment as media. And I wanted to, when I got this ticket, I kind of got it out of the blue, actually, at the behest of Hologram Dream, Angelina, who's been on the show before. If you've listened, you remember her. She kind of just finagled me into it, which I'm glad she did, and I got to see her there. But I wanted to go with just I was like, you know what? I never go to these things as just a fan, and I don't have to worry about like appointments, stuff like that. So I'm just going to do that. And I just went for one day because my plan was to, since I was going to Boston for the first time, I want to actually see the city, because I think I mentioned in a previous episode when I talked about this that like when I'm traveling to these cities for conventions, I never get a chance to see the city, and I would like to change that because I like traveling, and I don't know when or if I'll be back to Boston, so I would like to see. I want to take the time to go see Boston and enjoy it. So Friday was my show floor day, and then Saturday was my tour of the city day. So I spent all day Friday in the convention center and saw a few games. Pretty much all indie stuff. I usually don't would want to go to PAX to see a lot of AAA stuff. You know, they had it there, not a ton. As I was walking around, I saw they had Mortal Kombat playable. I saw Control playable, Days Gone. What else? Nintendo was there. Yoshi's Crafted World was there, which launched that Friday. And they also had like a lot of their third-party stuff playable that they announced at that last their Nindies, or not their Nindy, I think it was their Direct before that. So they had like Hellblade on Switch playable and some of the other stuff from that Direct. But yeah, when I go to PAX, I always prefer to just wander around the indie section and trying to find like smaller stuff that I've seen, as well as smaller stuff that I haven't heard of. I want to stumble upon some hidden gems. So the first game that I checked out was at Microsoft's booth, which had After Party playable, which is the new game from the Oxenfree developers with the two teens that go to hell and have to try to I think they have to outdrink the devil or something like that. That was there. That game was cool. I enjoyed Oxenfree. Outer Wilds was there, which to go back to that failed podcast of PAX that I have recorded. I was so tired during that thing that when I was talking about Outer Wilds, I kept confusing it, or not confusing it, I kept referring to the Outer Worlds, which is the Obsidian game, but for some reason I thought that the Outer Worlds was called the Outer Wilds, and I went on this rant about how people are going to confuse the two, they're both Outer Wilds. You can't call one the Outer Wilds and the other one Outer Wilds. How can Obsidian, how could they have not noticed? Nobody did a Google search that there's a game that's already has this title. And then because again, I was super tired and out of my mind. I forgot that it was not called the Outer Wilds. It was called the Outer Worlds. Outer Wilds was there, though. Outer Wilds had its own space too.
Wait, is it playable?
Yeah, it's been played. It was played by E3 last year too at Microsoft's booth.
Outer Wilds?
Not the Outer Wilds.
Oh, okay.
So let's just get this out of the way now. Okay. So the Outer Wilds is the Obsidian game.
Yes.
The New Vegas in space looking thing.
Okay.
That was announced after Outer Wilds, just Outer Wilds, which is an indie game that is also very much anticipated. That's about space as well.
Okay.
And I honestly don't totally know what Outer Wilds is. I keep forgetting. But I know it's got its own buzz. But when Obsidian announced the Outer Wilds, I was literally don't we have another game literally called that? Just with the? And I was like, did they not know that there's a game called Outer? That's gonna be confusing as shit.
Because I'm thinking the emails, I'm like, oh man, there's a lot of Outer Wilds news coming out, and I was like, oh, this is not the game I thought it was.
Yeah, and it's I want to know what does the Outer Wilds team think about the Outer Wilds? Is this gonna get in the way of stealing our thunder? People are gonna think oh, you're the Obsidian thing, right? And you're like, no, we're not. Oh, well, never mind, I don't care anymore. Even though their game is supposed to be really, really good, people that played it have a lot of great things to say about it. It's a very different thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just amazed. Did no one research hey, make sure nobody has his title before we decide on it? And nah, we're good. We're good on this. Yeah, I do get it. So yeah, that's why you're not listening. You're listening to this instead of that podcast. Basically, so I don't have to be wrong. So yeah, that was their Outer Wilds. The Good Life, Swery's new game, where you're the journalist, the photojournalist in the town that people turn to cats. That was there. But the game that I chose to play was Void Bastards, which is a kind of strategy shooter from Blue Manchu. Blue Manchu, yes, that is the right studios, published by Humble Bundle, and it's kind of blending, at least according to its description, it's kind of got a BioShock and System Shock 2 blend going on. Though when I was playing it, it's kind of FTL-like. And I've only played maybe a couple hours of FTL, at least back in the day, but yeah, it's definitely got that going on where you are in space, first-person shooter, and the idea, the base idea is that you're crossing this galactic map to try to reach a destination, and you're on a ship, And along the way, you're stopping at the smaller ships and all these other little checkpoints in order to gather supplies so that you can survive longer in space. Like you've got like a little menu showing how much you have and how many days you have to survive based on your resources. So yeah, you stop at these ships and you go inside and you explore them and try to find the things that you need. It's got a really sharp looking comic book aesthetic that gives the game a lot of personality. And for a game like that, it was a little hard to get a grasp on what I was doing. I'd only heard of the game by name prior to coming to PAX. And the demo's kind of just, you just kind of throw into a slice of the game. And for a game like that where management, or resource management, I should say, and it's kind of the nitty gritty stuff in terms of item crafting is a big part of it. It's hard to get a sense of what that game is trying to do with such a small vertical slice. Like, you want to sit down and mess around with those systems and see what you can make and kind of get a feel for like how everything kind of plays together. So I only really got a grasp on like, the actual gameplay part. So, I played through a few ships. You're wandering around these ships. You got a map and you're being attacked by the ship's defenses. So they'll have like automated turrets and robots and just all these other things. Like there's like a big, like hulking behemoth that had like spikes coming out of them. And you can shoot them with one of your many weapons. You've got like, you make a loadout. Like I had like a standard pistol, but I also chose a like staple gun thing. And the game's really goofy too, which I appreciate. Like one of the weapons is like these robotic, like cat, like things, like these cat AI bombs that you throw out, and they just kind of like patrol around and just attack whoever they see. And on top of using your weapons to destroy things, you can also manipulate the ship's systems to your advantage. So like at one point I found the control room that controlled the turrets, so I just turned them off so I didn't have to deal with them for what is there. So that's cool. The game plays really well. Like it's really smooth. I didn't have really any issues with like combat. And I'm going around room to room just finding resources and like oxygen tanks. And I could see myself getting into that like hoarding of things, of items. Like I was, even just the short time I was there, like, oh yeah, like I want to stop here to get this and this because I want to increase my chances of survival. And then with that on top of the loot crafting system, where every mission you go back and it takes you to this menu and it kind of distributes everything that you have into these different categories, and then you can kind of see what you can make. It seems like, at least from like the brief time that I play with it, like there is a satisfying loop of making new things, going to the next ship, finding other things through the, engaging with the fun gameplay to find new things, going back, making new things, and then just keep doing that rinse and repeat, I guess, until you reach whatever destination you have. Believe it's coming to Xbox and Steam for sure. I think it might be on Game Pass. I think. Don't quote me on this, but I thought I heard that. I don't know if it's coming to any other consoles, but it's coming this year. I believe this summer is what they're targeting for right now. But look it up. It's a cool looking game. The next game I played was The Forgotten City. Now, The Forgotten City has been around for a bit. I remember reading about this game maybe a year or so ago, and it's a game that began its life as a mod for Skyrim. The mod's been around since, for the last few years, I think since 2015. It was really popular, and now it's going to be its own standalone game, but it's not tied to Skyrim at all anymore, so it doesn't have any of the Skyrim, I guess, assets or whatever it was using. But looking at it, you can still see the influence. Like, it's still got the Elder Scrolls presentation, like it's first person. The character interactions are very similar, even the way that they're framed. It's choice driven. And the idea of the game, and I'm trying to find a way to describe it because it's such a interesting mismatch of just really disparate ideas, is that it is Groundhog Day combined with a murder mystery, combined with like ancient magic, like this ancient civilization and magic. It's weird, but it's set in modern times, like almost like Assassin's Creed-y to a degree. So you play as this person, your avatar, and the game is set in 2019. And in the beginning of the game, you're tasked, like, you wake up in this like these ruins, basically like these Roman ruins. And almost immediately you meet a woman who asks you to find her missing brother. You agree to do so, and eventually you find him, and he is all sorts of dead because he has committed suicide. And you read his note, and you find out that he went to this city and got trapped there. And like by trapped, I mean he couldn't get out, and also he was stuck in this time loop again, like very pretty basically Groundhog Day, and it drove him insane because he couldn't figure out how to break the loop, so he just killed himself. And so you enter this time portal, and you go back a few years ago, I believe to 2012, and you're in this forgotten Roman city that is occupied by about 20 something survivors, like modern day people that are just there. It's almost kind of Lost the TV show to a degree. And they've been there for so long that they've kind of formed their own little society, kind of makeshift society, and they don't know how to get out. And so you're the newcomer there, and you meet a guy who kind of runs down what's going on there, and he reveals that their lives are kind of dictated by this thing called the Golden Rule. And the idea of the Golden Rule is that the entire area is under the, what would you call it? It's like basically it's mandated by this magic law that if they break the Golden Rule, everyone there is going to die, basically. And so the entire area is surrounded by these gold statues of like Roman warriors and stuff. And breaking the Golden Rule basically causes them to come to life and murder everybody. But the problem is that they don't know what the Golden Rule is. Like, it's not explicitly stated what they can't do. So they're kind of walking on eggshells every day and kind of following what they believe is like maybe general guidelines of like, okay, maybe just don't be a dick. Like, don't kill each other. Don't steal. Don't do anything that would probably fall under something that sounds like the Golden Rule. So but they don't know. So like they could sneeze wrong one day and then that breaks the Golden Rule. So it's a terrifying existence for them. But they've found a way to kind of make it work for now. And so you're there trying to figure out how to get them out of this, basically, to fix this. And the Groundhog Day aspect plays into the gameplay. So like the entire game, I was talking to the developer of this, it was kind of made by more or less one guy. And he said pretty much the entire game basically takes place in that same day. You're just replaying it over and over, and then things change depending on your actions. So a basic example that I found when I was playing was that I meet a medic who has a patient who has just passed away by the time you walk in there. And she's telling you about this and saying how like, oh my God, I could have saved this woman if I had this charcoal, this medical charcoal, but this jackass is hoarding all of it, and he wouldn't give it to me unless I paid some just ridiculous fee for it that I can't afford. And like, because I couldn't get it, she died. And if there was only a way, I couldn't have gotten it before. So knowing this, you go talk to the guy and try to convince him to hand it over using a variety of different dialogue options. I was playing a bit of a roguish character, so I'm trying to intimidate him. It does not work. He sticks to his guns. So I decided to just steal it, and I steal it right in front of him, which, like Elder Scrolls, if you hover over the item that you're about to steal, the text turns red, letting you know, like, hey, you're about to be a swiper here. Swiper, no swiping. And then as soon as I did it, I broke the Golden Rule. And it's cool how that happens because, like, you do something bad, and then the entire world starts shaking, and you hear this voice saying that, like, the many must pay for the sins of the one, or something like that. And then all the statues that are scattered around just suddenly come to life and start slaughtering everyone, and everyone's running around trying to flee. It's just pandemonium. And then the game tells me to run back to the time portal that I started at, so because this is like a mission critical quest. So I'm running to the portal, everything's falling apart, I'm watching NPCs just running away and getting cut down. And the idea that I was talking to the developer of what happens here if I'd stayed to watch this, and he's like, oh, well, basically everyone's going to get killed first, and then they'll come after you, because it's supposed to be punishment of like, since you're the one that broke this law, we're going to make you watch everyone die for your mistake, and then we'll come after you, which I thought was pretty cool. So I go back to the portal, come back to the moment of when I just first showed up, so the guy that tells you how this all works is still there. You meet him again. You can skip all of it now because now that you have new knowledge, you just tell him like, oh no, like, I know all this. Like, you've met me before. And then of course he's like, have I? Oh, I guess maybe I just don't remember. Man, I drank too hard last night or something. And so he lets you go. And then, you run back to the medic. You make it just before the lady is about to die. You shove the medicine in her face. She is of course very confused as to how you knew what exactly to get her at the exact time. Like, what a crazy coincidence. But she's not questioning it. And then you heal her. Now, the entire through line of all this, and I should have mentioned this in the beginning, is that because in the future that you came from, everyone is dead. These people do not live to make it to the future, meaning that somebody breaks the golden rule. So you're in the past trying to figure out who's going to do it so that you can prevent everyone being dead. So, like, by the time you get to the future, everyone will survive. So the entire game, this is where the murder mystery comes in, is that you're trying to talk to all these people to determine who's going to be the one that breaks the rule. So, like, the medic was the first person I was asked to talk to kind of interview and kind of get a feel for, what's going on with them. And and then the game kind of tells you to do that with other people. Like, hey, talk to this person. Do you think that they're going to potentially break this rule? Like, because somebody's going to do it. And the person who sets you out in this quest dies, or at least is set up to die before that even happens. So he probably isn't the one to do it. Maybe. But yeah, that's pretty much the gist of the game, is replaying this day over and over, talking to people, getting information, and just trying to work your way until you have figured out who is going to be the person to do this, and then stopping them before they can break the rule and cause everyone's demise. It's crazy, right? It's a crazy game, but it looks nice. It's still, obviously in development, but it has a polish that a Bethesda game normally doesn't have, or at least their recent stuff, like obviously barring Fallout 76 because that's its own hot mess, but like Skyrim. And granted, Skyrim is many years old at this point, but like even watching like the character animations in terms of like when you talk to them and then they go to leave, like just even little things like that looked a lot smoother to me than Bethesda stuff. There's a lot of dialogue options, maybe more so than a Bethesda game. Like a lot of the interactions I had at least like 5 or 6 different responses. How they branch out in terms of it, like if there's enough meaningful branches, that remains to be seen. But if you enjoy Elder Scrolls or any narrative, I don't want to say RPG because I don't know if there's any RPG elements. I didn't level up. I didn't see if there's like skills you can learn because you're just playing a dude. Like I said, you're just playing a regular dude. The only thing I had equipped was a flashlight. Apparently there is some combat. I didn't experience any during my time with the game, but it looks cool. Like the juxtaposition of kind of modern day and ancient civilization is really cool. Again, in that sort of Assassin's Creed-y way. And I enjoyed it. I think it has a lot of promise. It's cool to see something that started out as kind of a mod kind of take on life of its own. And yeah, you should look it up again. The Forgotten City is supposed to come out, or right now it's scheduled for fall-ish of this year. Again, for Xbox and Steam, with maybe other platforms in the future, but it seems those two are what they're targeting at the moment. Another game I played very briefly was Tunic, which was the Fox Zelda game that was on Microsoft's stage at E3 last year, E3 2018. And it's it's developed by Finji, who did Night in the Woods. And it's basically an homage to, or at least, on its surface, is an homage to old school 2D Zelda, where you play as a cute little fox. He's got a green tunic, he's got a shield and sword. And then you're running around and you're doing the Zelda thing. You're cutting grass. It's in this very pretty and cute kind of like smooth polygonal environment. You're cutting grass, you're fighting monsters with your sword, you're going through little dungeons, you're opening chests. Like, it is Zelda 101. However, the developers describe it as being more Dark Souls than Zelda, which they said doesn't really reveal itself until a little bit later, like definitely not in the demo. The closest glimpse we got of that was the final boss fight at the end of it. It's like this giant thing, and I didn't really get to fight it much, but I guess it could count as a Soulsy fight. But I didn't see any Soulsy elements, like, I mean, I didn't die, but I don't believe you're, like, doing a thing of dying and having to go back to your body to get your loot. The combat doesn't play like Souls, like, it's not deliberate like Souls, at least not from what I played. It's very Zelda, just swing your sword and things explode into coins. So I'm really curious to see what that means. I don't know if they mean Dark Souls in terms of just sheerly difficulty, which would be a weird way to describe that. Like, you could just say the game is hard. We don't say like, man, this game is Dark Souls hard, because that's a very, specific kind of hard that you can't really use as a blanket statement for games. At least I don't think so. Maybe this person disagrees. But it was fun. It was Zelda. Like, I was sitting there, I was like, yep, this plays like a Zelda game, but it looks really pretty. I like the lighting. That fox is adorable, and I want a plushie of him. I was just wondering, like, I think it's slated for next year. I don't think it's 2019, at least from what I heard. Could be wrong. But I was wondering at the time when I was in line, it's like, man, the Link's Awakening remake coming later this year, is that going to eat this game's lunch a little bit? Because the game's original pitch was, oh man, a new top-down 2D Zelda game. And then Nintendo's like, hey, we're going to do that too, but we're remaking maybe the best one of those since Link to the Past. So it's like, oh, okay. Well, so maybe now they have to double down on the Dark Souls-y-ness of this game to make it different. I want to see what that is. There's so many Souls-like games now that I hope it's not just doing those things again, because I think we're at a point now where that's not necessarily as exciting as it once was. Like, hey, we put Souls elements in this game. I think things need to be more than that now. We'll see, I guess. Sticking with another Finji joint, I played a bit of Overland, which is this kind of interesting, like, turn-based strategy game that's set in this post-apocalyptic world, or at least a world that's on the brink of being a post-apocalyptic world that's being invaded by these monsters. And you're playing as these survivors, and you're basically trying to make your way across the country, I believe. Like, it's basically a road trip where you're trying to pick up survivors along the way. And the entire game is played out like an isometric turn-based game where you go into zones, like you're in a car, you drive to a zone, and then you're either looking for supplies, like fuel for the car, or you find a survivor, or just anything else. But the game is like an RPG where you have a certain number of actions. You're moving along a, like, plotted point. Like, you're like, okay, I can go up to 2 steps over here to maybe reach this gas can, but also these enemies are popping up and advancing on me. If you enjoy games like it's almost like a, I wouldn't say Into the Breach, but a little bit. I mean, it's a similar style, turn-based strategy. It's an interesting blend of ideas, like, like kind of survival and turn-based, because, like, and it's hard, or at least it was hard with my time with it. Like, so I picked up 3 survivors. And, like, you get hit once, and then, like, they're basically down. It's like, they could each take maybe 2 hits. And you're trying to decide, like, okay, like, I need to go get that gas tank. It's way over there. What's the best way to plot my course? Because, the enemies take their turns. And you don't inherently have weapons. You kind of have to find them. Like, I picked up a bottle that I could throw at an enemy. But, it's not like everyone immediately has, like, a weapon. So a lot of times you're just kind of trying, at least in the early goings, you're just trying to avoid enemies and trying to decide the best and most efficient way to get the things that you need and then make it back to your car safely so that you can escape. It's got a kind of simple polygonal look, like they almost look like kind of simple dioramas, the way the environments and the characters look. I enjoy turn-based strategy games, and it seems cool. Like, it almost reminds me of like, again, like turn-based strategy, but a little bit of like The Flame and the Flood, if anyone remembers that game from a few years ago, where you're stopping at certain points to refuel yourself so that you can continue down your journey downriver, or in this case, across the country. And then along the way, maybe you can, form a bond with the people you have. There's permadeath. Like, I eventually lost all my people and got game over, but, you lose somebody, and then the other character's like, no, I love Daryl. He was the best. Can't believe he died. Again, one of those games that's kind of hard to, at least for me, like, I need to spend a little bit more time with something like that to really sink my teeth into it, but I played it for about maybe 10 minutes or so, and walked away intrigued with it. Like, I believe it's on early access right now on Steam, and it's coming to the Epic Game Store that was recently announced. I think I don't know if it's going to be exclusively there, like if it's coming off of Steam and going there, like kind of like a Metro Exodus situation, but it's definitely going to be available on the Epic Game Store. Regardless, I think it's only PC in general for now. It doesn't have any, from what I saw, any console ports planned. That could change, of course, but for now, it looks like it's just PC. The next game I played very briefly was Cyber Shadow, which was recently announced just early this past week, which Yacht Club Games is publishing it, which is the team that created Shovel Knight. And it's a 2D, like 16-bit old school ninja game, like ninja platforming, so you immediately think of Ninja Gaiden. But it feels a lot more Mega Man-y. Like, basically, if you put a ninja in Mega Man, that's what I felt playing it, because the level design and the enemies feel very Mega Man. Platforming, there's the classic Mega Man enemy thing where it's going back and forth across a platform, and then when you get closer, it starts speeding up its trek, so you have to kill it. Some of the items look like E-tanks, and even just the general look of it, like, I was like, okay, this just looks like a new Mega Man, which is funny because Shovel Knight was pretty much a new Mega Man combined with DuckTales. But it was fun, coming off of The Messenger, which I finished earlier this year, which was another Ninja Gaiden-ish kind of throwback. It wasn't difficult to get right back into this. It didn't feel like it had like The Messenger's mobility. Like I was trying to see if I could like wall jump, stuff like that. Like I couldn't. I don't know if you can later on. Like I would like to see what the mobility options are, but it seemed pretty straightforward platforming. It played fine. I didn't have any issues with that. It felt good. Like I wanted to sit down and keep playing more of it because I'm a sucker for those kind of games. But yeah, like I said, this game was only recently unveiled to the world, so I suggest looking up a trailer for it, but I don't think it has a release date. I was asking the dev there, and they said that we don't know yet. We just kind of unveiled this, so we'll see. But I think it's one to keep your eye on. And then the last game that I played was Devil's Hunt, which I'd never heard of at all prior to PAX. It's developed by Liope Games, and it's a third-person action game where you play as a guy in a leather jacket, I guess it's leather, and you go to hell, and you just go around punching the shit out of demons, and it's pretty fun, even if it's kind of a unfinished state. I think it's been kicking around at least since last year. Like I said, I had not heard of this game at all till PAX. But what's cool is that the combat has a very fighting game-ish feel, and that, like I said, like you're just going around doing melee attacks. Like it's got like a Dark Souls meets fighting game where you're using the shoulder buttons to attack. Combat's a bit deliberate, but still quick. But you have combos, like a whole move list where you can string together your attacks like a fighting game and do different moves. You have like a parry attack where you can block and then counter attack. You've got all these special moves. Like I had a ground pound that did like area effect damage. It's a cool idea. Like it was satisfying to play. It looked nice. Like, like it's got like you're going through hell. It's got like hell looks cool. Like the particle effects look nice. You can even take people's souls out of their body, like Shang Tsung. Like you have a move where you literally rip the ghost out of a body and just suck it into you. That particular animation, as well as a few other animations, you could tell was still a little bit rough, a little like it still needs work, which is fine. The game's still in development, obviously. But from what they showed, I was like, okay, this seems like it could be cool. Like it played pretty well. I did have some. There wasn't a lock on, and I wish the game. I don't know if it will have one, but it feels like it needs a lock on because there was times when I was fighting multiple enemies and getting hit from my blind spots because you can only parry directly in front of you. Like it's not like you can just hold parry and then if you get attacked from the side or behind, it'll block. Like, so since you can't lock on, people are always kind of shuffling behind you and you kind of have to try to turn to face them so you can parry. But when you're fighting against two people, that gets a little tricky. So there's a lot of me kind of trying to retreat to kind of get them in front of me so that I can take them on head on. But the enemies were really good about like just kind of flanking you. So it needs a lock on basically. So I hope that gets in there. But it felt satisfying just pummeling dudes with you got like a demon arm, which is why, this regular human can just punch a demon's head and make it blow up. You're pummeling them, doing your crazy fighting game combos and uppercuts and kicks. It seemed relatively linear, at least from what I've seen so far. You're just going, you're just going from room to room down these corridors. You're finding keys to open doors to move on to the next area. Pretty straightforward stuff. But yeah, this was a cool surprise. Like it was one of those games like where's this been? I haven't seen this, and you're looking like this looks really impressive for where it's at right now. I know right now they're targeting Q3 2019. I think I was talking to the dev and he said like right now maybe September, but don't hold him to that. So it was a tentatively September for now. But yeah, like I said with everything else, you should look this up. It's a cool little thing that's kind of somewhat flying under the radar, it seems. And that's all the games that I've played at PAX. Like I said, I was only there one day just for Friday. I spent a lot of time just wandering around, looking at stuff. I saw Biomutant was playable there. Dreams was playable. Days Gone, I really wanted to get in because I just need to see what that game feels like because nothing about it really excites me so far. Like, it looks like it'll be fine and serviceable, but nothing extraordinary, just from everything I've seen of it. But that had a line, like a capped line for pretty much the entire day I was there. So people are at least excited about it, it seems, or at least the people in attendance. Nintendo was there, like I mentioned before, but, didn't have much. But it was fun, like PAX and just any convention in general. It's always, you feel invigorated going there because you're surrounded by so many like-minded people who are all just having fun, looking at everyone's cool cosplays, getting to talk to developers, especially indie developers that are, really passionate about their work. And, the same goes for AAA. I don't want to assume that AAA developers don't have the same passion, because they most certainly do. But it was a fun deal. And like I said, the next day on Saturday, I spent that entire day just touring the city. Got up kind of early, had me some breakfast, and then I just walked everywhere. Which isn't, at least for me, I like to walk. I'm a walker guy. I'm a walker Texas Ranger. Bet you didn't know that about me, but I wear a cowboy hat on the regular because it makes me feel like a tough person. Nobody steps to me. Would you step to someone wearing a cowboy hat? Probably not. Or at least wearing one, like, unironically. But I did a lot of the kind of Boston-y things. I walked the entire Freedom Trail, starting with Bunker Hill, which in hindsight was maybe a little bit of a mistake, because Bunker Hill was like the furthest like point away from where I was. So I was like, okay, I'll start there and then work my way backwards, because like the beginning, or at least the bottom point of the Freedom Trail, was near my hotel. So I was like, okay, I'll go all the way to Bunker Hill, go backwards. That makes sense. So I go to Bunker Hill, and they have like this spire there that you can climb, this tower to the top. It's like 2 stories tall, maybe 3. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll climb that thing. I thought at first there was an elevator that took you up, but that was silly on my part. But I was like, oh, I can climb it. I walked about maybe a mile and a half to get to Bunker Hill, and then climbed that thing, and it just utterly destroyed my knees and my legs, because it was about 294 steps, I believe is what it is. And by the time I got to the top there, I was just done. And I was huffing, and I was like, I don't know if it's like, my cardio is generally pretty good, but I don't climb a lot of stairs. I don't have stairs in my home. I don't really go anywhere that has stairs. I don't climb stairs often, so I was not prepared for that, especially after walking there to begin with and all that stuff. So I got to the top, and I'm just spent sitting down, looking out the window, going like, yep, I'm high. There's the city. And then walking back down was also, it was easier, of course, but still a bit of its own hell, because my legs were like shaking. Like by the time I got to the bottom, my legs were literally shaking as I was standing. So I just kind of had to sit down for a bit and then kind of go, oh crap, I still have to walk the rest of this. Just destroyed my legs and my thighs. So that was fun. And then from there, I made my way over to Cobb's Cemetery, which is a very historic cemetery. It's very old. It's been around since the 1600s. And, it's surrounded by all of these just old gravestones. Like, it almost is going to just, to assign a nerdy reference to history, it was like the Keyblade graveyard in Kingdom Hearts, where you just see all these gravestones just sticking out in every which way, just almost stacked on each other, it felt like at points. And you can still read a lot of them. So you're looking at them, you're seeing like, oh, John Smith died in 1635 at the age of 55 from a heart attack or something like that. And it's crazy, I don't know, dude, like, it's just something weird about seeing something that old, and knowing that these people are buried here, and like knowing exactly who they were and how they died and what date. Like, I don't know, like, I'm a huge history guy. Like, I get a kick out of seeing old things and going, man, that existed at some point. Or it's crazy to think that this has been around this long. I love reading a history of it. Like, I just like that stuff. So I was just like reading a bunch of the headstones and just going, man, like, I know this person's name and how long they lived, and they're right here now. And you I just want to take a time machine back. Like, what was it like really back then? Like, obviously we have records and stuff to reference, but you still don't know unless you were there. So I hung out there for a bit, and then I eventually made my way to the Paul Revere house and toured the inside of that, which again, you get a kick out of like, man, like, this is this old house that's been around even like 100 years before Paul Revere. I believe it was constructed in the 1600s, and then Paul didn't stay on it until 90 years later. But a lot of I think they said 90% of the original framework of the building is the original framework that's been there for centuries. So just being in something that old and it's surrounded by all this modern architecture, like, it just kind of sticks out. It's super cool, and you're going through all the rooms and seeing how, like, all this old furniture and getting an idea for the style at the time and how these people lived back then. I love that stuff. So if you ever want to hang out with me in a city, you have to love it too. You have to put up with like, let's go to a museum or let's tour this thing. You gotta be down for that kind of stuff, because that's gonna be what I want to do more likely than not. But from there, I walked, the rest of the Freedom Trail, looked at all the churches, because Boston, I feel like, has an old church around every corner. Like, I don't think I've ever been in a single space that had so many churches, but not a single church's chicken, which is very odd. And then I eventually walked to Fenway Park, which was the longest walk I had. It's only about 3 miles, which isn't, for me, that big a deal, but I guess going through a big city, that's a long trip. Like, when I was telling people that I did, they're like, wow, that's a long walk. I was like, well, 3 miles, not really. I guess, to me, I guess it isn't. But I made it a point to walk everywhere because I didn't want to just take a tour bus or subway, because I wanted to see the city. I wanted to feel it. I wanted to be amongst the people, and I wanted to see what I could just observe along the way. Like, I found so many cool looking shops and just little things going on. Like, I just wanted to see what a typical day was like in Boston. Like, I got to walk through Boston Common, which I think is that big park with the public garden. Like, I walked through there to get to Fenway Park. Like, it's just not the same getting on a bus and just, being stuck in traffic, first of all, and just looking at things out the window. It's like, nah, and it was beautiful too. Like I said, the weather was perfect for it. It was nice and mild, so I wasn't sweaty, but I wasn't freezing either. And, eventually made it to Fenway Park, which was super cool. I don't watch sports. I don't care about baseball, but, I recognize that Fenway Park's an historic place, and I wanted to see it. And they were having a soccer game going on. Like, I think the Premier League started. Like, there was this little rally outside of Fenway Park that took me by surprise. I ate at Tasty Burger. It's like right by the stadium. And I guess it's like the official burger of the Boston Red Sox. I ate there, and it was indeed a tasty burger, lived up to its name. And then I did take a Lyft back. Like, that's the only time I used like a ride service was to get back. So I wanted to go to the New England Aquarium, which was near my hotel. I stayed at the Intercontinental. So that was my last big thing, was the New England Aquarium, which I'm a huge sucker for aquariums and zoos and any kind of museum like thing. So I was like, I have to do that. And I didn't realize that the New England Aquarium is kind of famous. I just thought it was just an aquarium. But it's a well-known one, apparently. And went in there and stared at some fish. Had a great time doing that. They had this cool, penguin exhibit that kind of goes around. Like, they had, rock hopper penguins and African penguins. And penguins are always fun to just kind of stare at them and go like, man, look at those penguins being penguins. Awesome. I love looking at they have this cylindrical water tank in the center of everything that goes up, because the aquarium's 3 stories, I want to say. So everything is wrapped around this giant cylindrical water tank that has just hundreds upon hundreds of different types of fish and sea turtles and rays and eels. And so as you're climbing it's wrapped around this spiral not a staircase, thankfully, because my knees, I don't think, could handle it at that point, but ramp. So you can see the inside of the tank at almost every possible angle until you get to the top, and then you can look down at the entry. And they had a little presentation with one of the employees talking about dropping some knowledge about the tank. And yeah, just staring at all that stuff and looking at all the different exhibits. They had freshwater exhibits. They had an anaconda in there. They had a jellyfish exhibit that was cool. It was a nice way to end a day of just walking around. I'm just gonna relax here. It's relaxing to stare at an aquarium and just see all what you can find in there. Oh my god, look at that weird fish, and look at that cool looking thing. Got to touch some stingrays in the little pool where you get to pet them and stuff like that. They had sea lions. Got to watch sea lions do tricks and be sea lions. That was fun. Oh no, it was a great day. Ended it by going to a couple parties. I also went to a Giant Bomb's panel. I actually did that Friday night. So at the end of PAX, I went back and attended Giant Bomb's panel. Got to meet Jeff Gertzman, which is cool. I'm a fan of their stuff and their podcast. So I got to go up to him and very nervously talk to him as much as I tried to play it cool. But he's an imposing man. He has a stature that makes you go, oh man, that's the guy. I'm suddenly afraid. And I went up to there at him and after the show and shook his hand and let him know that I worked in game press as well. And he's like, oh. And looking at Jeff, he has a face that he's got that weathered look of I've seen everything in this industry, which he kind of has for the most part. And as soon as I mentioned I was a game press guy and personality as well, I just felt his eyes scanning the depths of my soul. Just trying to get a handle on who I was, like kind of seeing if he liked the cut of my jib, I guess. But I just felt it. I was like, yeah, I'm a game press guy too, and I have my own podcast, and I do a lot of personality driven stuff. And he's like, oh, okay. And I just felt like all my dark secrets being exposed to him somehow. But he was a super nice guy. Joked around a bit saying how nervous I was and how I was trying not to be, quote unquote, that guy that's like, I don't want to take up too much of your time, which he seemed to get a little bit of a kick of and stuff like that. And then I also talked to Dan Reichert, who I finally got to meet for the first time. It's funny, when I entered a Game Informer, I missed him there. But he was kind of one of the reasons I kind of decided to start doing this stuff years and years ago because, he's an entertaining personality. We have very similar tastes, especially when it comes to like wrestling, but we have very similar game tastes and kind of like styles, I guess, writing. So like when I first kind of started getting to his work, I was like, oh man, he's just like me, and he's doing this stuff. Like I should do this. And then never had a chance to meet him. Like we have a lot of mutual acquaintances, and I would always hear from those people like, oh man, you guys would get along so great. You're so similar, like personality wise. So I finally cornered him here and talked to him for a while, and I made a bingo card about him when he was a Game Informer a few years ago that ended up on an episode of Replay. Like I brought that up and he seemed to remember me, and I've DM'd him on Twitter every now and then over the years just for advice and stuff like that. So we've had like very, very, very brief like interactions on social media. So like he seemed to remember me once I kind of reminded him of all that, which was cool. And yeah, just a super cool dude, just really, really nice. He smelled heavily of beer, which I'm not surprised. I think Jeff mentioned they had dinner before the panel. So I was like, that was my two impressions of Dan. Like, man, what a nice guy. Also, man, he smells like he just swam through a beer bath. Like he's like Stone Cold Steve Austin just sprayed him with beer and then he showed up. But I mean that with all due respect, a lot of love. He was, like I said, he was super gracious. Got along great. We talked for a bit. Would have loved to talk to him more. I was trying to be conscious of not hogging Dan. There's other people waiting to talk to him. So like, okay, I got to find a way to exit. Like, okay, great talking to you. Gotta go. So I know there's people probably waiting going like, hey, get the hell out of here, dude. We want our turn with Dan. But yeah, it was awesome finally getting to meet those guys. Alex Navarro was there as well, as was Austin Walker. And the panel itself was very entertaining. Pretty much just a live version of the podcast. So it was a great time. Even waiting in line before, I met some cool people. Shout out to Sam and Christian, two Sams and a Christian. We played a lot of Mario Kart 8 on Switch together and chatted up for a while as we were waiting for the panel to start. Got to know each other, find out what we all did. So shout out to those three guys for making the wait for the panel all the more bearable. Got to hang out with Exato Games, which is the team that Hologram Dream and Jelena works for. Finally got to meet them for the first time. Hung out with them on a few different occasions at just different venues. So again, shout out to those guys for being awesome. Also shout out to one Nathanius, popular streamer. I believe he one of the top StarCraft streamers in the world. You might remember him from EA Play last year at E3. He helped kind of unveil Command & Conquer Rivals, I think that's the name of the mobile game, to the world. Met him and a few times actually throughout the weekend and hung out at just different little events, and another great guy, a lot of fun to talk to. Also shout out to the curmudgeonly old man that approached me on the street as I was watching the Boston Tea Party reenactment at the Tea Party Museum. Just kind of looking at that from across the river. And this local guy came up to me and complained at length about how stupid those people were. He's like, yeah. He's like, you see those idiots over there? They don't realize if they're in the real Boston Tea Party, you know what would have happened to them if they were throwing that tea overboard? You know what would have happened? And as I stared awkwardly at him and then realized that he actually wanted an answer, it wasn't a rhetorical question, I very sheepishly replied, they'd be hanged for it? And he's like, yeah, damn right they would. And then proceeded to repeat that point, that they'd be hanged for throwing tea overboard. And he was probably the most, at least this was the first day that this happened, and was the most stereotypical Bostonian I'd met yet. He had the accent in full blast. He had a Red Sox hat and just seemed seemed irked by this for some reason. I don't know why. He just was not happy with seeing this reenactment takes place, which I would imagine he would have to see a lot of because I'm assuming he's a local. So you think he'd just be used to it after a while. I don't know. Had a lot of really cool Lyft drivers too. Like as I was lifting, using a Lyft to get around the city, got some hot restaurant recommendations. Had some great conversations with various drivers. I'm sure you're listening to the show now on during your commute, right? Right? But everyone was super friendly. Like I said, by the time I left Boston, I was like, you know what? I wouldn't mind living here, I don't think. It's like a less dense and a bit more friendly New York. I was like, it's got the cool kind of like city vibe about it, but it's not oppressive about it. Like I like the architecture. It's got like a hominess to it that I like. Of course, all the historical stuff is right up my alley. And then it was just easier to get around. Like I wasn't shoulder to shoulder with people on a regular basis. Like, it was crowded, but it wasn't like, oh my God, like I'm just in a moving sea of humanity at all times. So who knows? Maybe one day I would like to visit again, hopefully, and maybe spend a little bit more time there, preferably not in the winter months. And that was my PAX East, guys. So looking forward to going again next year, hopefully, and maybe even going to PAX Prime later this year. I'm kind of eyeing that because I've never been to PAX Prime, or PAX West, I guess is what it's called now, up in Seattle. So we'll see, but right now, I guess the next trip I'm kind of aiming my sights on is, of course, E3, which should be a very interesting show for a variety of reasons. But for now, I just want to finish unpacking, maybe get some much needed rest, do some laundry, and lay down and dream about lobster rolls. I had a really good lobster roll. It was a really good lobster roll. And that'll about do it for this episode, but before I go off, I do want to briefly mention that I started playing Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. I started playing it briefly right before flying out for PAX, and then played a little bit when I got back. My brief impressions of the game so far is, oh, this isn't so hard. At least that was the early on. I was kind of dropping everyone. I was like, okay, I know this won't last, but I'm doing pretty good. And then all of a sudden I was not doing very good and started getting my ass handed to me. So for an idea of where I'm at, if you're further ahead, I have run into two bosses that I'm stuck on. One is the fat, drunk guy with giant sword, and the other is the ogre that's kind of in the not the guillotine, but like, what do you call the thing that you put your head in medieval times? The gallows? Whatever it's called. You probably know what I'm talking about, the ogre with the eyes. I'm kind of fighting him because I left the drunk fat swords guy because he's surrounded by like a gazillion dudes, and I was like, he seems kind of harder, so I'm going to fight this other ogre guy. And I've been getting close, but they keeps kicking my ass, and yeah, now I've hit my first wall with this game. So far, I'm both loving and hating it. I think it plays really well, like controls-wise. It looks fantastic. I'm playing on Xbox One X. The combat has a really nice deliberateness to it, and I like how, I've heard people compare it to Bushido Blade and how, like, you can kill a guy instantly and how every attack matters. I like that aspect of it a lot. I like the emphasis on movement and verticality, like having a jump and being able to like grapple up high and like sneak and take people out, like that, those Tenchu influences I'm enjoying. Like, I'm liking the game so far. I'm just trying to get better at it. That's where I'm at right now. So like other Souls games, because I'm a fan of Souls and Bloodborne especially, I'm just trying to master the game. I can't grind the way you normally can because that's not how the game works. You don't get stronger, you just get new techniques, so you still have to learn how to execute them in a skilled way. But yeah, you'll likely be hearing me talk about Sekiro as I play about it, maybe in both a joyful and angry. So far, I'm enjoying it as much as where I'm currently at makes me want to set fire to a kitten orphanage. And with that, thanks for listening, guys. I know this was kind of a relatively bare bones episode in terms of like, no crazy music or effects or anything like that. Just because, again, this was kind of the backup plan after the lost episode of the very tired discussion with me and Julian Odell that is now archived next to the Ark of the Covenant in that giant warehouse. It's being moved around constantly by a forklift. But tell me what you think. If you were at PAX as well, let me know what you thought of the show and what you played there. You can do so by reaching out to me on Twitter at MarcusStewart7. That's the number 7. And be sure to like, share, subscribe the show on YouTube at Marcus Makes Media. It's the name of the YouTube channel where you find this show and other podcasts I've done in the past. You can also find the show on SoundCloud at the same name, Marcus Makes Media. And you can also listen to the show on iTunes and Podbean at Marcus Writes About Games. Different name for that one. You can also check out my review that went up during PAX of Eternity: The Last Unicorn. I've talked about it in the last couple episodes. That review is now live at screenrant.com. Again, Eternity: The Last Unicorn, my first review for the site, and also the most negative review I've written in some time because that game is not good at all. So if you want to find out in detail about why it is kind of a garbage, as they say, be sure to visit screenrant.com and search for Eternity: The Last Unicorn. So for now, folks, I am going to go and recover from my trip. My legs feel like lead after all the walking around I did. So I'm going to go lay down or something right now. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next Monday. Have a good one.